Chapter 45. Question and Answer. Some at the table of the speaker, however, were a bit slow to comprehend. They turned with the following somewhat silly question to the speaker and said, "Good, wise friend and brother, you have a lot of light in you and speak words of wisdom. We absolutely cannot deny this, for also we are quite equipped with wisdom and can therefore properly judge whether what someone says is wise or stupid. Also with you, we cannot say that you not have spoken wisely, but we recognize your wisdom as perfect. But there is a point therein about the saturation of our spirit, which does not sound right, at least not in the way you have served it to us. See, you said, the word resolves solid matter in its inner basic forms, through contemplation of which the soul is saturated. And when forms are dissolved to the innermost foundation, we thereby can understand in them the spiritual meaning, to thereby nourish the spirit. With that we agree with you. However, that man, with his feeble words, can dissolve solid matter, like red-hot ore a drop of water? Brother, just think about this yourself a little, and you will immediately recognize your vein blow into thin air. Talk to a stone for 1,000 years or more, if you can live that long, and the stone will still be a stone as it was created, of course through a much more powerful word than ours. Therefore, we would like to ask you to smooth out this knot for us, since we also care about your honour, despite the fact we do not know from which neighbourhood you came to us. Even more so because the high guests at the other table seem to pay attention to our conversation, and even the two mighty ones from the heights. But the speaker got up and said to the well-meaning critics, "Does true wisdom conform to eternal truth, or to the weakness of the world? What answer do you want to give me to this question? Who of you has wisdom should speak?" You remain silent and seek for an answer. But I maintain that this time you cannot find one that will satisfy me. Have I then spoken about a physical or mechanical dissolving of matter? You are all good-naturedly embarrassed about my honour before the high-ranking guests of the other table. What should I then do now to save your honour, since through your question and through this your critical assessment of my speech to your benefit, you really brought more than an old wife's stupidity to the brightest sunlight? Did I not speak of an inner living word of love from the heart, which first expresses itself in clear thoughts or mental forms, and then transforms into the language of visions, and only then, if necessary, because of the weakness of people with merely coarse senses, it spills over into oral language, so that the coarse senses of such weak people, through the frequent saturation of the spirit in them, become refined. And they then, thus refined, thus with more alive senses, contemplate the things in its truth, and thereby continuously more and more saturate their spirit, so that he, as the actual life in man, can arise and become the perfect master in his house. While, as it is now the case with you, he is nothing more than the sheerest, meaningless servant of matter, the judgment, and thus also death? If I then have talked only about such words, tell me then, how is before God and all the world your understanding constituted, that you could not have grasped this, and rather wanted to distinguish yourselves with your coarse stupidity, rather than asking a friendly, humble, modest question about a certain point of my speech, which appeared somewhat dark to you? Here the former critics looked at each other quite puzzled, and no one was able to justify himself in any way. But Lamech said to Hanoch, "O brother Hanoch, if there exist more such wise men in this my city, I will look quite awkward besides them. For he talks as if he had come straight from the heavens to us." But Hanoch said to Lamech, "Brother, just be patient. The speaker is not finished yet. But if he will be ready, then I will tell you what you have to do. But it will come even better. Of that you can be fully assured. Therefore, be patient. Amen."